It is now October, the greatest month of the year for all fans of horror and the macabre. But before we get too far into festivities, let's take a moment and look back at all of the movies that I watched in September 2024. All 17 of my first-time discoveries, 16 of them being horror movies and one just being an autumn movie, ranked from worst to best. My name is Daniel with the Cobwebs channel, and let's get started with my number 17, which is Fear No Evil from 1983. Wait, 1981. We're off to a great start here. So Fear No Evil is a high school horror film with a fantastic premise. It's about how the devil, Lucifer, was killed by an archangel at the beginning of the movie, but they know he will be back. And 18 years later, he does come back in the form of a teenage boy and has been growing up in this teenage boy's body for his whole life. Now some people have got to bring down Lucifer in the form of this kid and also look for what other teenager in the high school is going to take the form of the archangel. So I like religious horror films, I like high school horror films, and I watched this movie on this Scream Factory Blu-ray that I actually got for $6 from Hamilton Book because I was hoping to talk about it in my video last month on some underrated retro horror movies, and didn't talk about it in that video because I did not like it. I did not like it at all. I do not recommend it. I was so disappointed in this thing. It's actually directed by Frank LaLoggia, who, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who directed The Lady in White, which I know a lot of you guys are a big fan of. But this one, I thought it was so badly made on like a technical level, and it's so dull. Like, for the awesome premise that it has, I don't understand why this movie is so boring. I remember checking it like 40 minutes in, like, where are we in this movie? I feel like almost nothing has happened. And we were 40 minutes in and I just couldn't believe my eyes. You do get the devil in this movie, but he's just played by some like skinny guy with some goofy hair, and he was not cool at all. And I just didn't like the actors in this movie. And that's kind of an unusual thing for me to say. I'm a very actor-friendly person. I just tend to like actors when I watch movies. But I thought they were kind of off-putting, boring, not very good. I just didn't like them. I thought this was really dull. There's some kind of cool horror stuff towards the end of the movie, but not enough to save this. I didn't like it. At number 16 is A Field in England from 2013. So I watched this in my Severin All the Haunts Be Ours folk horror box set. Amazing box set that I just keep chipping away at movie by movie. And I watched this one because of the folk horror ranking video that is my last video. And, you know, I heard such great things about this movie. A lot of people have praised it. In fact, the woman who directed the incredible documentary in this set on folk horror, I believe I heard her say that this is her favorite folk horror film of all time. So I watched this with high hopes, and I thought it was kind of okay. One thing that I heard some people say about this, the more negative reviews before I watched it, is that it starts out pretty boring, but gets really crazy and cool by the end. And I kind of had the opposite experience. I was interested in the beginning in the setup. It's about these guys during a war in, I think, the Civil War in England. And there's this one guy who is the apprentice of an alchemist, and he is on the hunt to find his master. And he hooks up with some deserter soldiers, and they're like going through a field in England. And I really liked the actors. I thought they were all great, very memorable. I liked the conversations about alchemy. I liked the black and white just atmosphere of this field out in the middle of nowhere. And one character even sings an old folk song. Baloo, my boy, thy mother's joy, thy father. If a folk horror movie has a character sing an old folk song, I'm probably going to love it. I thought that was great. But by the end, it just doesn't really go anywhere. Where the movie ends up going is it feels like the director, Ben Wheatley, just wanted to play around with editing. And things get very weird, very psychedelic. And the editing is pretty cool. Like, it's really crazy. But narratively, the movie just doesn't really go anywhere for me. I don't know. I ended up just kind of waiting for this movie to be over, to finish its crazy editing so I could move on with my life. And eventually I did. And I thought the movie was just... it just whimpered out for me. At number 15, Speak No Evil from 2022. So this film is about a Danish couple who's out on vacation with their daughter, and they meet another couple who has a young son who are Dutch, and they invite them to stay a weekend with them out in their house on the Dutch countryside. Now, the wife is a little hesitant about this, like maybe we don't go to a house of people we don't know, but the husband really wants to, so they go, and crazy stuff happen. So I watched this movie. I've been meaning to watch this movie for a long time, but the remake of it actually just came out. Yeah, 2 years after this movie's release, Blumhouse put out a Hollywood remake, which is weird because yes, this is a Danish film, but it's almost entirely in English. Occasionally your Danish couple speaks Danish to each other. Occasionally the Dutch couple speak Dutch, but when they're talking to each other, which is almost the whole movie, it's in English. So the subtitle barrier isn't really even there. So I don't really understand it, but I did hear from some people who went to see the remake that the remake is like the more fun version, and this Danish version is not fun. Like, it is so uncomfortable. It is just so awkward. Like, it's so hard to watch just people be in a social situation trapped with other people. The other people are being really weird and uncomfortable and pushing their boundaries, but the Danish people just kind of letting it happen and not leaving. Apparently the director made this as a commentary about Danish culture and how they can be too nice and too friendly, and this was a condemnation of that. So the movie is interesting. It is very well done. It's lower on my list because ultimately by the end, I feel like it mostly exists for shock value, and it's shocking. It is disturbing. Like, it's legitimately upsetting. I saw things in this movie I did not want to see. And it's just kind of miserable by the end. And that's just not my kind of movie. So I'm actually kind of curious to watch the remake and just see how this was made into more a satisfying Hollywood movie. I'm curious. Number 14, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice from this very year. Yes, I finally went to see this sequel. Actually, my wife and my son and I went to see it opening weekend. But as soon as we got in the theater, my son, he's a toddler, he just started crying. He's been okay in theaters before, but we couldn't make it through the previews for this one. So we got our money back. We went home. And then a couple weeks later, my wife and I went on a date night to go see it, and the movie is fun. That's my ultimate take on it. Now, I love the original Beetlejuice. I think it's fantastic. Is this movie as good as Beetlejuice? No, like, of course it's not. But I still went into it with pretty high hopes because I'm not a Tim Burton hater. A lot of people think Tim Burton lost it in the 2000s. He hasn't made a good movie since Sleepy Hollow or maybe Big Fish. I think he still made some good movies in the modern age. He's a director who's really good at keeping up with the times. Like, he's really good at continually making movies for the younger generation, whoever the younger generation is at that time, and being very successful with them. Like, my least favorite Tim Burton movie is probably Alice in Wonderland. But I remember when Alice in Wonderland came out, it was a huge deal. Like, young people, my peers, loved it. So Tim Burton's very good at that, and he seems to have done it again here because this movie was a big hit. But ultimately, like, it's not as good as Beetlejuice because the script is kind of a mess. I can't believe how much this movie has going on. It's got like 4 villains in it, and it keeps forgetting about the different villains that it's introduced. Like, the movie really sets up Monica Bellucci as basically the live action version of The Corpse Bride. That's another really good 2000s Tim Burton movie, by the way, as the big bad of the movie. And I wish she was, because she's one of the best things about this movie. She's awesome in it, visually just so cool. But the movie just kind of forgets about her a lot, and like, it keeps introducing conflicts and resolving them in the easiest possible way. So I thought the script was not very good, but it's fun. It's funny. My wife and I laughed a lot. The cast is really good. Winona Ryder is really fun as weird, neurotic version of herself. Michael Keaton hasn't lost a step. This is a good character to come back to, like, gosh, what, like 50-ish years later? Because, I mean, he's buried in makeup. He's got a gravelly voice. It just kind of works. At number 13, HauntedWeen from 1991. So this is a regionally made slasher film that takes place on Halloween about a kid who murdered someone years ago, and now as an adult, he is back and he's gonna kill some fraternity guys and sorority girls who are trying to make a haunted house in his childhood home. And I don't want to say too much about this movie because I specifically watched it for an upcoming video I have on underseen Halloween movies. So really excited to make that video, and I want to talk about this movie here because it's a fun movie. I really enjoyed it. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, hit subscribe because I got a Halloween video on the way. At number 12, Hell's Trap from 1990. This is a Mexican slasher film. It's in Spanish, so you got to read subtitles, of course, about a couple of guys who are these rivals, and one of them challenges the other, hey, let's go out into into the woods, and the first one who can kill a bear, because there was a reported bear attack recently in this area. The first one to kill that bear is like the ultimate champion and gets gloating rights forever. So they go out there, they take their girlfriends, they're camping, going out and trying to kill a bear, and maybe it's not a bear. Maybe it's a guy with long claws and a spooky mask, and maybe he's gonna go kill some people. So this is a Vinegar Syndrome release, and I talked about this in my recent video on like underrated old horror movies, and I just had so much fun with this movie. The characters, no, they're not great, they're not beautifully written, but they're fun, they're memorable. The killer is very memorable. There's some cool kills in here. This is just a fun Mexican horror film. I've discovered a lot of fun Mexican horror films lately, and this is definitely one. At number 11, The Stepford Wives from 1975. So this is about a New York family who moves out into the suburb of Stepford, and the wife starts to figure out that there is something wrong, something perhaps sinister about the wives in Stepford. Yes, this is a legendary horror film that I finally saw for the first time last month. I watched it because I put out a video on top 10 suburban horror movies, and this is such an iconic suburban horror film. I knew I had to see it, and it did make the list. I think it's very good. I think the only thing that decreased my enjoyment of it a little bit is I did know how it ends. I mean, this movie's so much in the cultural zeitgeist, it's kind of hard to avoid. I would say if you don't know how this movie ends, like definitely watch it before somebody spoils it for you. But for the most part, it just feels like a 70s drama. And a good one. Like, I thought the performers were very good. I thought it was an intriguing story. I definitely liked it. At number 10, Kwaidan from 1964. This is a Japanese folk horror anthology that adapts 4 different Japanese folk tales into some ghost stories. Now, I watched this for my folk horror video that I put out last because I knew this was like a really famous Japanese folk horror movie, and I felt like it had to be represented, and it's definitely a good movie. The thing that held this movie back for me is it is 3 hours long. I watched it over the course of a couple of different nights, which is easy to do when it's an anthology, so I'll give it that. But for only 4 stories, the stories do feel overly drawn out, especially the third one, which is about the ghosts of an ancient battle. I mean, that one is really long for a very simple story, but the second story is like, it makes the movie for me. It is so good. It's called The Woman in the Snow, and that story was actually later adapted into Tales from the Dark Side. Like, that classic horror anthology took a story from this and modernized it and such. But yeah, I think this is a good movie. It's got a lot of great creepy moments, and it's just visually stunning. At number 9, Mario Bava's Lisa and the Devil from 1973. I have owned this movie on Blu-ray from Arrow Video for years and years, and I finally watched it because I actually guested on the Schlock and Awe podcast to talk about this movie and another Mario Bava film. It's probably not out yet, but you can check out Schlock and Awe podcast and subscribe for when that drops. Yeah, I finally watched this movie, and one thing I was surprised to learn about is Lisa and the Devil is just Mario Bava's original cut, but there's actually a studio metal cut that I think was released first called House of Exorcism that kind of turns this into like a possession movie, I guess. I haven't watched that one yet, but Lisa and the Devil is nothing like I expected based on the title. I was expecting the devil, and yeah, maybe the devil's in this movie, but this is ultimately like a classic old dark house movie where this woman and these people who are giving her a ride end up stranded at this old mansion. They go in to get some help, and people start getting killed off one by one. The movie is very weird. It doesn't always make a lot of sense. It's kind of a great movie for an example for dream logic, for sure. But it's fun, and it's really entertaining, and Telly Savalas plays the butler of this mansion, and maybe he's the devil even? Like, there's some crazy stuff that happens here, but I just thought it was a fun old dark house murder mystery with some really good performances, actually. At number 8, this is going to be controversial. I want you guys to brace yourselves. John Carpenter's Memoirs of an Invisible Man from 1992. So I'd actually seen this movie before, but it was my first time watching it since I'd bought the Blu-ray from Scream Factory. And I guessed it on an episode of the Film Feast podcast. Been doing a lot of podcasts lately to talk about this movie. And I'm a fan of this movie. Like, it's pretty maligned as far as John Carpenter's career. It seems to be, but I really enjoy it. I think what might be contributing to people's disappointment with it is they're like, oh, it's John Carpenter, classic horror director, John Carpenter's take on the Universal Monsters Invisible Man. That's not what it is. That is not what it is at all. It's not based on The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. It's actually based on a different book called Memoirs of an Invisible Man. And actually, the movie that was John Carpenter's primary inspiration for this was North by Northwest. This is about an average guy played by Chevy Chase who ends up in a freak accident turning invisible, seemingly permanently invisible. And a government official played by Sam Neill is trying to track him down, take him in, maybe to turn him into a weapon for the military, maybe to do some experiments on him. Chevy Chase doesn't know, but he doesn't want any part of it. So he's on the run. So this is a man on the run from the government movie, but also a romantic adventure film as he falls in love with Daryl Hannah and she falls in love with him. And I think it's really fun as just a romantic, old school Hollywood star vehicle adventure movie. I think it's a blast. I think Chevy Chase and Daryl Hannah are great in it. I think Sam Neill is spectacular in it. He's a great villain. I understand John Carpenter had a horrible time making this movie because these two were very difficult to deal with, and he didn't really get to make the movie he wanted. That's too bad, but still, I think the movie they ended up making is pretty darn good. But at number 7, Craze from 1974. So I checked this movie out in this new box set from Vinegar Syndrome called Prule Britannia, which is basically just a box set of 3 British thrillers from the 70s. And Craze stars Jack Palance as a pagan cult leader who worships a god named Chuku, who is also a serial killer because he's continually needing to offer up human sacrifices to this god, so this god will bless him with money, business success, whatever else. And I thought this movie was a blast. I thought it was so much fun. Now, it's directed by Freddie Francis, who I'm a huge fan of. I mean, he directed what I think is the best Hammer sequel, Dracula's Risen from the Grave. He directed a lot of the Amicus anthologies like Tales from the Crypt. So he does a great job here. But man, the show is Jack Palance. Jack Palance is spectacular in this movie. He is so fun. And watching this movie, it made me realize I think Jack Palance is one of my favorite actors. Like, I just love him. I don't like him as Dracula. I know a lot of people like him as Dracula. I know a lot of you guys like him as Dracula. But for me, Jack Palance is at his best when he's just being like a slimy weasel. And like, that's not Dracula. Dracula is better than that. But Jack Palance is absolutely in slimy weasel mode in this movie, and he's so perfect. So much fun as this cult leader who fully believes in this god Chuku. He's a total zealot, going around killing people. We watch his process. We watch him just, go meet people, try to trick them, get them into these situations, kill them, like going through the whole process with him. It's very interesting. Also, Susie Kendall is in this movie, who I'm a huge fan of, from like Bird with Crystal Plumage and Torso. Just love Susie Kendall. She has such a fun role in this. This movie's a blast. I haven't watched the other 2 movies in here yet, which are Penny Gold and Crucible of Terror, but I'm looking forward to it. But my number 6 is another Vinegar Syndrome release. It's The Caller from 1987. So this movie actually did make my retro horror list. And this movie stars Madeline Smith as a woman who is living out in her cabin out in the woods. And Malcolm McDowell shows up, says he has a flat tire and he needs to use the phone. And the rest of the movie is them talking and playing these mind games with each other, power balances switching back and forth between them. We're watching this movie trying to figure out what is going on with this creepy guy, Malcolm McDowell, but also what's going on with her. Like, clearly she has got some skeletons in the closet. And it's a very interesting little mystery with fantastic performances and a crazy ending, like a really crazy ending. I thought this movie was pretty great. My number 5 is Ari Aster's Midsommar from 2019. So I talked about this in my full core video, and some people might have been shocked by how low I placed it, and I may have come across kind of negative in that video. I'm not sure, but I do think this is a really good movie. I think it's very interesting. It's very entertaining. At 2.5 hours, it's very engaging for the whole runtime. But I do think it's more interesting as a movie about a crumbling relationship than a movie about a pagan cult. But in some ways, the cult stuff does factor into the relationship themes pretty well. For instance, there's a shocking scene that everybody remembers from this movie where it reveals what the cult does with their elderly and how they talk about how they don't want to just rot away slowly in a hospital or a nursing home because that corrupts the spirit. They just want to end things. And I think that's an interesting metaphor for the central relationship between Florence Pugh and The character's name is Christian Jack Rayner. That's the actor. In that their relationship is terrible. Like, it is pathetic. It's painful to watch from the beginning. The relationship stuff is not necessarily emotional because we never see the good in their relationship. It's terrible from the start because she's totally emotionally codependent on him. He doesn't love her. He wants out of this relationship, but doesn't have the heart to break up with her. And from the beginning, you're just like begging these people, break up. Break up. You will both be so much better off without each other. I swear, like, it'll hurt at first, but you'll be fine. So their spirits are being corrupted by keeping this thing festering and rotting throughout this whole movie instead of just cutting things off. And I thought that was a really interesting parody that I noticed on this viewing. So the relationship stuff is pretty interesting. Some of the cult stuff it's a gorgeous movie visually, and I really do like it, but I didn't like it quite as much as in the theater in 2019 when I thought it was like amazing. Number 4, Mill of the Stone Women from 1960. This is the first Italian horror film to be filmed in color. It's actually not a Mario Bava film, and it has such a cool story about a guy who goes to help out this sculptor. He's like a scholar, a student, and there he falls in love with the sculptor's creepy daughter while also romancing a woman who seems to be much better off for him. But the creepy daughter, there's weird stuff going on with her father, and with the sculptures that this guy has built, a house of horrors that all runs on a carousel. This movie is creepy. It's got a great vibe. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it did make my list of underrated old horror movies that I made last month because I think it's great. I got it in this really cool chunky box edition from Arrow Video, but I actually got it on sale for only $20. And this actually has 4 cuts on it. I think I just watched just the normal cut. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but yeah, 4 different cuts on here and a ton of special features that I'll definitely have to dig into. My number 3, this is going to seem really random. This is a little 1988 dramedy that takes place in the fall called Mystic Pizza. It centers around a small pizza shop in Mystic, Connecticut during the fall season and follows 3 different waitresses in their relationship troubles, their life troubles, and just following them through life. And I loved this movie. I think it's great. I'm kind of shocked it's not talked about more because, like, I mean, for one thing, it's got a lot of like great actors early in their career. Probably the star of the movie is Julia Roberts before she made Pretty Woman, but it's also got early performances by Lily Taylor and Vincent D'Onofrio. And it's actually Matt Damon's first movie. He shows up for just a couple of lines. And like, it's such a feel-good movie. I felt great watching it. It has gorgeous fall atmosphere in a small New England town. I just love that kind of thing. And I was really invested in all their relationships, but it's not like overly mean to the characters or tragic. This is ultimately like an optimistic movie that wants the best for the characters. And I really appreciated that. It's not like too dramatic that things get too sappy, you know, it keeps things fun and pretty light. I made a video recently about fall movies I recommend. Tack Mystic Pizza right on there. I totally recommend this movie for some great autumn vibes. But my number 2 is November from 2017. This is an Estonian folk horror film that takes place in a small pagan village in 19th century Estonia and sort of functions like an anthology, all in this village, but just telling different stories of the different people that live there and their various problems and their various magical folk remedies and witchcraft that they use to get through life. I thought this movie was fascinating, beautiful, haunting, and really romantic. I kind of fell in love with this thing. It shows bizarre pagan practices that I've never seen in a movie before, like that of the crot, which I found out is a real part of Estonian mythology. Household products you could put together and make a deal with the devil to bring it to life. Absolutely crazy. And I would say probably the central story of the whole thing that really holds it all together is about a young woman who is in love with this man who's not in love with her back, and her just trying to get through that unrequited love and get him to love her. And I thought that was all just like so heartbreaking and just really emotionally affecting. I thought this was a beautiful and extremely unique folk horror film. And if you're into weird stuff like that, like I am, I highly recommend this movie. But my number 1 is The Stepfather from 1987, which I'm just including on this list because I watched it for the first time on 4K. Scream Factory just put out this new 4K release of this movie. I felt very lucky that I never bought this movie on Blu-ray before, so I was able to justify getting the 4K. And man, this movie looks absolutely beautiful on 4K too. Like, I've never seen the colors pop in this movie before like I did when I watched it on this. I mean, this is just a beautiful movie with great atmosphere and autumn leaves, so the colors definitely pop. Anyway, it's a great film where Terry O'Quinn plays a stepfather who is a secret serial killer and kind of moves from family to family and killing them when things don't go his way, and then he moves on. I think this is one of the best horror films of the 80s. I think Terry O'Quinn's performance is amazing. So happy to have this. So that's my list, but what did you watch in September? Let me know down in the comments below, or what are you planning to watch for October? It's the greatest month of the year, so let's all take some time to enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, I would really appreciate it because I've got a lot of really cool videos coming in this very special month. Give a like if you enjoyed this. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.